streets, obviously, and then they have traffic enforcement agents. We used to call them brownies as cops, which is kind of a derogatory term, but what they basically do for punishing the police officers, just to give you an idea, is if you don't make your quota or your recommended daily, monthly amount, they'll stick you on post. Example would be, I have personally been on this post for not doing it. They'll stick you on the Brooklyn Bridge in January, walking back and forth on the bridge. Well, not good if you've ever walked the Brooklyn Bridge in January. But
I don't think I'd want to walk it at any time. There's so much traffic. But yeah, go ahead. That'd be pretty horrible. Yeah.
So, or they'll stick you in a location like you work in Brooklyn, and well, now you work in the Bronx. So now it's harder for you to get to work, obviously. And those are the minor punishments, as well as trying to get you fired. They'll run internal affairs on you.
Doug, you mentioned doing that. They did that to Adrian Schoolcraft. They said, all right, you're going to walk the beat as a cop. And, he was happy with that. That's what he saw his job as a cop. He got to know the people in the community. They got to know him. They trusted him. He didn't harass them for minor violations like we were talking about. He was there when there was a serious crime. He actually liked that. So it didn't work for him because he was a real cop. But I understand walking the Brooklyn Bridge in the middle of winter, that's pretty severe duty. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the beauty of what you just said, a foot post is great because exactly what you said. You know all the parents. You know, all the store owners. So if something happens, with this example, little Johnny does something. Hey, Johnny did this. And then you can deal with the situation before it gets serious.
Exactly. And that's the way the cops used to be. When you go back and you look at the way they talked about cops, in the early part of the 20th century in New York, or you look at the way the bobbies used to be in England. I remember in the 1980s when I first went there, they were walking 2 by 2. They weren't armed. They did foot patrols. When I went back several decades later, they were in police cars like the American cops, and they were carrying guns, most of them, and they were detached from the people. The only thing that they were noticing were traffic violations and that sort of thing, because that's what their focus was.
Exactly, and that's what they did in New York. They put 2 of them in a car, and they controlled them. There's hardly a football, unless it's Brooklyn Bridge. There's hardly a football anymore. So, you're detached, exactly what you said. You're detached from, the people, society.
So what do you think is the solution to this? You talked about how it's kind of a corporate situation, or the previous caller did, where we don't really have, especially with police, we don't have elections for police chief. We have election for sheriff. It's a very different situation. Should we have municipal police departments, or are they too hard to control?
To be honest with you, I think they should elect them all, because at least the people are making the decision.
Exactly.
On who they want in leading that, leading the police department.
I feel that way. I think if they're going to have a municipal police department, they ought to stand for election just like a sheriff. And if you've got a police force that is unaccountable to the people, that shouldn't exist. And that's the problem that we have, really, to take the analogy to the federal government. That's the problem we have with the federal government. We have the bureaucracies who are writing the laws, calling them regulations. They're created by Congress, and then Congress just lets them run loose, just like Pelosi said, we got to pass Obamacare so we can find out what's in it. Well, they got to create these different agencies so they can find out what they're going to do. And eventually, if it gets really bad, Congress will come in like a white knight and try to get them under control and take the credit for that. But Congress has abdicated its responsibility, its duty, its lawful authority to write the laws. They've delegated that to this permanent, entrenched, unaccountable bureaucracy over and over throughout our government. It started with the IRS, but now every bureaucracy works that way. And I think that's one of the problems with law enforcement. I want to get some of the other callers. Thank you so much, Doug. Let's go to Greg in Arizona. Greg?
Yes, sir. Correctional officer in Arizona, former Special Forces engineer. And I see a lot of these inmates coming in, and they are under, some drug. They did something with drugs, and then they get further into the gangs. They get the tattoos all over themselves, and they basically give in to the criminality, and they can't get out. Not with this economy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the problem also, don't you think, of arresting people for things that are nonviolent crimes and putting them in jail for a very long time with the mandatory minimums. 80% of the people who are sent to jail with the war on drugs are for nonviolent marijuana crimes. And what that does is that hardens them. It not only destroys their life, not only takes them out of society, of course it makes a lot of profit for the private prison companies, but it also puts them into a criminal culture as well, don't you think?
Oh, very much so. The thing about it is that they can't even keep the drugs out of the prisons,
yes,
which are supposed to be the, preeminent security. And how are they going to keep it out of the country?
Absolutely. We've made that point multiple times. Every year, I'm glad you brought that up. Every year, there are multiple deaths from drug overdoses inside of prisons. I remember a story in Maryland. There was a mother, her son was addicted to drugs, and she tried everything to try to get him off of drugs, so she called the police on him. They put him in prison, and he died from an overdose in prison. She said it was worse than when he was on the outside. If we cannot control drugs with force on the inside of a prison, what kind of a prison society are we trying to build here in this country? Stay with us. We'll be right back with more callers.
This hour brought to you by InfidelBodyArmor.com. When it hits the fan, don't be left without the body armor that will save your life. With prices starting at just $374.99 and ships free. Get yours at InfidelBodyArmor.com. Just won't quit.
Hi, Ted Anderson with Midas Resources. Is it time to convert paper 401ks and IRAs to solid gold and silver yet? Get our 10 Reasons book free. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
Silver has always been nature's very own antibiotic, and only one system allows you to generate an endless supply of natural silver solutions. SilverLungs.com. You'll find no wild claims or pseudoscience, just a lifetime of nano-sized pure silver solutions. The Silver Lungs generator allows you to make your own, so stop paying for silver solutions. The unique lung delivery system targets respiratory infections where other silver solutions simply cannot reach. See the Silver Lungs generator and lung delivery system at SilverLungs.com. That's SilverLungs.com.
As the New World Order continues to tighten its grip on every facet of our lives, we're all asking ourselves, how can we maintain our independence? The answer is clear. Get prepared, and you get prepared now. Now the only question left is, where do we begin? My Patriot Supply is here to help. Call 800-247-3070 to get started with your 72-hour emergency food supply for only $10. We're even covering the cost of shipping. Are you willing to rely on the government and FEMA in the event of an emergency? Call 800-274-3070 to get started with your 72-hour emergency food supply for only $10. You won't be able to find this deal online, and there is a strict limit of 4 per caller, so don't wait. Call now, 800-274-3070. That's 800-274-3070. Call right now.
Usually, the older one gets, the less you are able to absorb amino acids and the less you are able to repair the 100 trillion cells of your body. As a result, you'll have less energy, your tissues will shrink, and you'll become wrinkled. An older person will typically injure more easily and heal more slowly. Not fun. However, if you can consume a protein powder that is easier to absorb, then you may be able to gain back some strength, muscle, and speed of recovery. One World Whey is a highly digestible whey protein powder that may be the perfect answer for you.
My name is Errol. I'm 74 years old. You know, the taste of One World Whey is amazing. I play pickleball, and since taking One World Whey and your trace mineral supplement, I have more energy and recover faster from my working out. I used to take another grass-fed whey protein powder, but now I'm getting much better results using One World Whey.
Call 888-988-3325. That's 888-988-3325. Or visit oneworldway.com.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. We're taking your calls from ex-police officers or current police officers talking about this article that's up on Infowars.com about a Missouri officer who blew the whistle on the fact that they were using essentially 75% of their time to write tickets and generate revenue. And so that, of course, is a very common thing. We saw it to a large extent in New York City. The last person I was just talking to, Greg from Arizona, worked in the prisons, was talking about how it just made them worse to go to prison, which, of course, is part of the reason that we have these mandatory minimums, perhaps. We've known this for a long time, as Rob Jacobson just handed me an article going back to 2009 from the UK. Overcrowded prisons act as a university of crime. Absolutely. A university of crime for the young. They say simply building more prisons is an expensive dead end. Yet here we are, 6 years later. That's precisely what we're doing. And before we go back to your phone calls, there's an article that just went up on Infowars.com. Kit Daniel had Obama suggests Islamic extremists have, quote, legitimate grievances. Hey, you know, these guys, they need jobs. They need a democratic process. He says President Obama suggested that radical Islamic groups like ISIS, which beheads Christians and other Muslims for not obeying Sharia law, can only be stopped if governments are willing to listen to their, quote, legitimate grievances. He says, this is Obama talking, governments that deny human rights play into the hands of extremists who claim that violence is the only way to achieve change. Efforts to counter violent extremism will only succeed if citizens can address legitimate grievances through the democratic process and express themselves through strong civil societies. The irony of that statement. Here we just had an election. The key issues were that we didn't want to have open borders. We didn't want Obamacare. We didn't want corporate mandated insurance to be forced upon us for his corporate cronies. And now they're talking about forcing vaccines on us. We're going to be taking your calls in the next hour about personal experiences that you've had with vaccines. They're removing informed consent from vaccines, just as they removed informed consent from purchasing your insurance. And, you know, buying insurance and having insurance is not the same thing as having health care. Those are very different things. They don't always work that way. But they are transferring our money by holding a gun to our head to force us to do these things. So here you've got a president who could care less what the people say in the election if the Congress, the majority Congress that the people just elected, if they don't do what he wants to have done. He says, well, you know, I'm just tired of waiting for you to enact my agenda. I'm going to do it myself. But I want to go back to these ex-police officers or current police officers who are holding on the phone. Let's go to Chris in Nevada. Chris?
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hopefully we can wrap this up. I'll give you how agencies have been dealing with the quota issue. They don't call it a quota. There's really no such thing. However, they do it through policy and procedure. A lot of agencies that are accredited do it through that because this CALEA is the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement, and that's related to the Police Executive Research Forum, which is the governmental type. What do you call it?
So you're saying that they call it a policy, and like in New York City, for example, their policy was what they called the broken window policy. If you go into a neighborhood where there's a lot of broken windows, we're going to really scrutinize the people there. And as they pointed out in The Gothamist, when they were talking about this work slowdown, they said tamping down on all forms of, quote, disorder, things like resting a foot on a subway seat or biking through a stop sign. And they say that's not cheap. It costs them about $1.3 million a day to process 648 misdemeanor arrests. And guess what? When they get rough with people, in New York, they've had nearly $500 million worth of lawsuits since 2009. So it has real dollar and cents consequences. It may not even be simply about the money. It may simply be about government strong-arming the citizens into submission. Stay with us. We're going to have more of your calls right after the break.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
The month of February is all about Valentine's Day. Big heart-shaped boxes filled with delicious candy. What if we, the Patriots, hijacked Valentine's Day and instead made it about human liberty and individual empowerment? I'm all about human potential. I'm all about the individual being empowered. The establishment is the opposite. That's why they spike our water with fluoride and GMO, estrogen mimickers, and the rest of the garbage. InfoWars is striking back in the month of February with Human Empowerment Month. How we can come together and win the human race. And to celebrate the kickoff of Human Empowerment Month, we're slashing prices on InfoWarsLife.com products like Super Male and Super Female Vitality. The sale is only running for the month, 20% off, and there's a lot of other powerful specials at InfoWarsLife.com. InfoWarsLife.com, celebrating human potential in the month of February. Visit InfoWarsLife.com to find this special and many others in the month of February. Again, InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-31.